China has scrambled fighter jets as the U.S. Navy ship sailed close to a disputed reef in the South China Sea. Beijing slammed the U.S. warship's navigation operation.
The relevant Chinese department took measures of monitoring, tracking, and warning in accordance with the law. I have to point out that this action by the U.S. side threatened China's sovereignty and security interests, endangered the staff and facilities on the reef, and damaged regional peace and stability. As we have reiterated many times, China resolutely opposes this action by the U.S. side and will keep taking necessary measures to safeguard China's sovereignty and security.
The Chinese Foreign Ministry Spokesman added that relations between the U.S. and China have faced serious difficulties in recent years. He also called on the new Philippine government to take practical measures to handle territorial disputes. Beijing and Washington have traded accusations of militarizing the South China Sea. China is undertaking large-scale land reclamations and construction on disputed islands, while the United States has increased its patrols and exercises in the region. Let's bring in from Leesburg Mike Billington from the Executive Intelligence Review, who joins us. Mike Billington, this comes on the heels of how China has denied a U.S. aircraft entry into the Hong Kong port, which happened about last week or so. And this escalation is really getting to extremes. What are we looking? What's your take on this? What are we looking at in terms of where this is going to go?
Well, it's extremely dangerous. Keep in mind that China then allowed a U.S. Pacific fleet to dock in Shanghai. They're there now. So there are multiple approaches being taken by China. The point is that this Obama mobilization against Russia and China, the most massive military mobilization since World War II, surrounding both nations on their borders with offensive weapons under the guiding U.S. policy of prompt global strike, which is a first strike policy. We're dealing here with a Western administration under the British and Obama, which is totally bankrupt, facing a general breakdown crisis now very much underway in Europe and the United States, and at the same time, a recognition that China is leading the alliance around the BRICS nations in posing a new world based on development, based on what used to be the proudly called the American system, building infrastructure, building power, inviting nations to join them in space. So the attempt by Obama to threaten Russia and China is failing. Both Putin and Xi Jinping have responded correctly. They've refused to back down to this overt, aggressive threat of war, but neither have they allowed themselves to be provoked into some sort of tit for tat in a local area like the South China Sea or like in South Korea with the THAAD missiles or around the Philippines. They're not being provoked into what could be used as justification for an aggressive world war, thermonuclear war, now in preparation by Obama. The use of the new term which emerged over these last couple of weeks by Obama's puppet Ash Carter of accusing China of excessive maritime claims, which is of course a new term meant to twist international law to defraud the world, to fraudulently claim that they have some sort of a rule of law basis on which to mobilize this war threat against Russia. But as I mentioned, Obama's in deep trouble. He's been exposed by Putin's intervention in Syria as an ally of terrorists. He is shown in Europe to have basically forced the European nations into self-destruction by joining in the fraudulent sanctions against Russia. And now Obama is panicked. He's going to Japan and Vietnam this week, trying to hold together this anti-China coalition, which in fact is falling apart rapidly. In fact, China and Malaysia just today came to an agreement on dealing with the South China Sea issues bilaterally, not through this attempt to use so-called international means to impose U.S. aggression in the region. This recent intervention into the Nansha Islands is clearly a breach of international law. Their claim that they're protecting freedom of navigation is, of course, absurd, since nearly 95% of the trade in the region is with China. It's China who's concerned about freedom of navigation, and freedom of navigation does not automatically apply to military shows of force of this sort. But again, we're dealing with a Chinese nation which is dealing with this properly. They're proposing a new paradigm of the sort that Mr. and Mrs. LaRouche have supported, the new Silk Road, the new Maritime Silk Road, which is mobilizing support internationally against the growing fascist policies in Europe and the United States. Obama is, at this point, increasingly exposed as having allied with fascism in Ukraine, with terrorism throughout the Middle East, with the Saudi sponsorship of terrorism and the British sponsorship of the Saudi royalties' control over international terrorism, and that this can and must be exploded in these coming weeks by bringing this president to a court of law, have him placed in prison where he belongs, certainly impeached from his office, long before waiting for an election, which is going to change absolutely nothing. In fact, we may have World War III before that election if we don't take action now to deal with this kind of tyranny.
Thank you for that. Mike Billington from the Executive Intelligence Review there.
Thank you.